Bitcoin just got a little bit of a correction and everyone is freaking out. In today's video, we'll be talking about if this is a cause for concern or if Bitcoin is just shaking out the weak hands and preparing for its next leg higher. We'll be going over the Bitcoin charts and going over some of the more bullish news that just came out, which somehow managed to push Bitcoin lower. If you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Without further ado, let's jump right into the video. First of all, a quick note on the whale that we've been tracking. You can see that he actually exited his Bitcoin long once again in a loss, and now he is currently sitting at a negative $4 million P&L. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because if we take a look at his all-time stats now, he is no longer in profit. We can see that all-time on perps, he is down about $3.6 million, and over the past 7 days, he lost $60 million. You can see that his positioning is just atrocious here. He entered a Bitcoin long right around 108.5K, and now as I'm recording this video, we are at 107.3K. His liquidation level is sitting right at 105K, which I will discuss, I think, is a possibility that can be touched if a key level is breached. Now let's get right to the Bitcoin charts. What we can see here is that the previous all-time high is continuing to act as resistance for Bitcoin. That previous all-time high is set right around 109.5K, which was set back towards the beginning of the year. This becomes a very important level. Sure, we went ahead and breached it, but as we move below, we can see how the price actually reacted to this level. Once we came back down, we wicked above it, came back down and tested this key area, which is a daily support level, then pumped up to this level once again, and then we came back down. Over here, we were starting to get a little bit optimistic that we could potentially hold this level as daily support, but we did not have enough strength to do so, and right now Bitcoin got a relatively larger drop. However, if we take a look at it from the peak here all the way down to where the current price is, that is only about a 3% drop for Bitcoin. Keep in mind, in bull markets, we can have up to 30% corrections. Now, I'm not saying that we're just going to tank from here, but I was warning you guys of this before. I really did think that Bitcoin would go ahead and get corrected. Now, in this video, we're going to talk about if it's possible that we just go ahead and V-shape recover right here to all-time highs past $112,000. And my answer to that is no. I still think that Bitcoin does have some more room for downside. As we can see here, if I really zoom out and look at the daily chart, we broke above this key all-time high level, and getting acceptance below the previous all-time high is simply something that we don't want to see. Now, in the immediate term, where can we get support? First of all, we have this level, which is the range that Bitcoin has been operating in. Now, this is the hourly chart, but you can see here that we went ahead and formed that double bottom that we talked about a few videos ago, which brought us to target the Monday high wick all the way up here. Then we came back down. So at this point, I would actually expect Bitcoin to go ahead and trickle down and potentially try to hold this level as support. However, this is something you need to pay attention to. If we start breaking below 106.2K, the next immediate target is right around this 102K region. This would trigger an excellent short in my opinion, as long as we get the confirmations we need below the range of 106.2K to 106.5K. Once again, why is this level important? We never previously had those daily closes above that level, and now that we got those daily closes above that level, it will become super important for us to hold it. If we can manage to hold this level, then at that point, I would be saying that perhaps we can consolidate here and then go ahead and have enough fuel to put in a new all-time high. But so long as Bitcoin continues to trickle down here, this is the most important level that you need to pay attention to after the previous all-time high, which we've been discussing at length over the past week. Now, it seems like we got that rejection. Let's see how things play out. But ultimately, this should prove for support if you are a bull here. Now, personally, I do think that there is a likelihood that we go ahead and move lower because this is not even that much of a correction. From the top here, $112,000, give or take, to the bottom where we ended up here, that was about a 4.6% correction. I still think that there is room to move lower, and the next level is 106.2K in my opinion. After that, we would go all the way back down to around 102 to 105K, give or take that region that you should be paying attention to for the next major support level, should this level be breached. Now, if we take a look at the stock market, we can see on the day that this is a red candle, not that much cause for concern, a pretty red candle, all things considered. But what I really want you to pay attention to is, unfortunately, if we are repeating what happened back in 2022. Now, if you've been following the channel, you know we talked about this a few weeks ago. It's been a while since we brought this up again, but what happened back in 2022 is we broke below the 200-day moving average, we popped above it, and then we weren't able to hold it as support, and we went ahead and moved aggressively lower. Now, this is starting to look a little bit similar. We managed to hold it as support at the top here, but this is the same breakthrough that we saw back in 2022. Now, if we are to come back down and retest this 200-day moving average, for the bulls, you would want to see us hold this level as support before we can spring off, hopefully, and make a new all-time high. Now, you know this is a crypto channel, but the reason why I'm bringing up the stock market is because, as we know, if stocks move lower, Bitcoin goes ahead and moves lower. And I talked about a post the other day that the correlation between Bitcoin and the S&P 500 is actually 0.86, which means that they are heavily correlated. Now, USDT dominance, we talked about this very recently, but if this just ends up being a wick below the support line and we end up closing the week above this level, in particular the month above this level, then that would mark the local top for Bitcoin once again. Whenever USDT dominance goes ahead and pumps to the upside, that is when Bitcoin sees severe corrections. And whenever we go ahead and break through this level, that is when Bitcoin can get enough fuel to move higher and higher and higher. Now, taking a look at ETH Bitcoin, this one is a little bit interesting because although Bitcoin got a correction, we can see that ETH Bitcoin is indeed bullish on the week. Now, hopefully we can close the week like this and muster up enough strength to break above this bull market support band to hold it as support, and then we can go ahead and take off. If this is the case, altcoins will be getting some fuel. However, so long as we're below this level, I am not bullish on altcoins quite yet. We need to hold above the bull market support band as support, and then we can go ahead and start speculating on some altcoins, despite the fact that monetary policy has remained the same. On the day here, Bitcoin dominance is indeed red, and this is likely to do with the fact that ETH against Bitcoin is green. But overall, altcoins are still struggling against Bitcoin, and as I've been saying on the channel, I still think that Bitcoin dominance will likely continue to increase. Everyone freaks out when Bitcoin has these tiny corrections because their altcoins simply cannot handle it. Now, despite the fact that ETH is showing relative strength, I would like to see that confirmation before we can go ahead and move higher. You don't need to catch falling knives. You don't need to catch the bottom for Bitcoin. It's always okay to wait until we get confirmation before you go ahead and enter a trade. And that is exactly what I'm doing. Now, if we take a look at this chart, we can see that there is a lot of liquidity to the upside starting to pile up, and we went ahead and grabbed all of this liquidity to the downside. But if we look at the bigger picture, still there are more longs in the market than shorts. But the positive news here, as I shared within my community before recording this video, is the fact that more and more people are starting to short the market. Now, why is this positive news? Because before, you'll remember as I was covering this chart, there was about 6 times more longs than shorts in the market, suggesting that we would be seeing some kind of correction. It's always what happens. Not in the immediate short term, but in the medium to long term, we usually get corrections towards all of that liquidity. Now, right now, as more and more people start entering shorts in the market, as we can see here, $8.5 billion worth of Bitcoin shorts, sitting right around $122,000. That means that if price were to go all the way up to 122K, we would be liquidating all of these shorts. On the flip side though, there is still more longs in the market, but I am happy to see that this ratio is starting to balance out a little bit more. 18 billion in cumulative long liquidation leverage, sitting right around 96K. Now the reason why 96K is an important level is because if we are to lose these support levels, we can see that there's a nice gap around here. So the first level that you want to look at, as I said, between 106.2K to 106.5K, depending on the chart that you're looking at. If we break below there, and we get rejected on the daily time frame, that would trigger a short to lower regions, likely targeting this area. Then, if that area does not hold as support, we would be targeting back below into this breakdown region, which was very, very important because it was the region that we consolidated in before we went ahead and put in that low. And if we zoom out a little bit, here's what I think could play out. We talked about this in a previous video, but perhaps we are mimicking the 2021 cycle. And what I mean by this is if we are to take what happened back in 2021, if you've been watching the channel, you know exactly what I'm about to do. Overlaying this chart with the current chart, it is starting to look eerily similar. Back in 2021, we had that first top, we came back down for an aggressive move, and then we had a slightly higher high. Now, I'm not saying this is exactly what happened, but what I am saying is that there's two possibilities here in my books. Either this is the second high and we go ahead and dumped, or the second scenario, which I am more favoring, is indeed a little bit of a cool off into the summer, as we tend to see in the crypto market, and then we go ahead and put in that brand new all-time high towards the end of the year. When I say brand new all-time high, I know we just hit an all-time high, but I mean a more aggressive all-time high, perhaps 120, 130, 140K Bitcoin. The reason why I think this is probable is because see over here back in 2021, we had that move to the downside, then we came up, then we had a little bit more of a correction, and then we pumped even higher. We did not have any kind of correction. This has just been a ton of weekly green candles for Bitcoin, and now we are finally starting to see a little bit of a correction, struggling at the previous all-time high right around 109.5K, which only made sense. Now, if this were to play out and we are to have a more significant top towards the end of the year, what we could see here is a little bit more of a correction and some chopping around during the summer. This would, of course, be a tricky environment for altcoins, which is why I have been recommending for your spot portfolio to be mainly in Bitcoin for the longest time now. But anyways, if we were to chop around here during the summer, and then we potentially touch this trend line and get rejected into a bear market, this could see us go all the way up to above $120,000, depending on how you want to paint this chart. Now, if we connect all the tops, it is a very clear chart. And again, as I've been saying in my previous videos, if we are to ever break above this trend line and hold it as support, that would bring the question of super cycles, but we're not quite there yet, and I will make sure to cover you if that actually happens. And taking a look at Bitcoin quickly before we wrap up this video, what we can see is a little bit of relief here coming back from these lows, but I do still think that Bitcoin will likely go ahead and roll over despite all the positive news that has been coming out. Now let's talk about that positive news, because first of all, Vice President JD Vance says that over 100 million Americans will soon own Bitcoin. He also claimed that about 50 million Americans already own Bitcoin. I'm not sure how accurate this is, but these were his words directly at the recent Bitcoin conference. Also, the European Union says it's in constant talks with the US to finalize a new trade deal. That is, of course, positive if it materializes. This was a very interesting one. GameStop just bought 4,710 Bitcoins worth $512 million, $500 million. And what happened to their stock? They were down about 5% today, which is very, very interesting. Maybe this could mean that the local top really is in, because usually when we've seen companies adopt a Bitcoin accumulation strategy, their stocks tend to pump quite a lot, similar to what happened with MicroStrategy. But this time around, seeing this decline could suggest that we are perhaps seeing a local top. Now, before we wrap up this video, I did want to give you an overlook of the weekly and monthly chart for Bitcoin. Here on the weekly, we can see that we are not looking like we're going to get that close above the previous all-time high. That is very, very important for confirmation, because as you can see, this weekly chart is starting to look like a weekly SFP. So let's see what actually happens here. I personally think that Bitcoin does have more room to the downside before we can go ahead and move higher. But that is, of course, my own bias. As I've been sharing in my videos, I will always tell you exactly what I think could happen with Bitcoin, but in trading, we always play the probabilities. If we get acceptance back above 109.5K and we can hold there as support on the weekly and the monthly, all of a sudden, we are going to go much, much higher and much sooner than I would have anticipated. So keep your eyes on this level. It is extremely important. The two most important levels that I am looking at right now, 109.5K, the previous all-time high, and 106.2 to 106.5K for those daily closes above that level. If we start getting daily closes below that level, at that point, I do think it would be a relatively interesting Bitcoin short. However, starting to get confirmation above these levels on the weekly and monthly time frame, 109.5K, it becomes a relatively easy risk to reward long to much, much higher levels. And if you want to trade Bitcoin, you have the first link in my description, which brings you directly to Bluffin. There is still a couple spots available for this promotion where you can get $5,000 for free in terms of your futures bonuses. And I also have weeks, if you prefer that exchange, where you can get up to $30,000 in rewards based on how often you trade, and you can also get up to $100 for free for the first 100 users that go ahead and sign up with the second link in my description down below. Bluffin number 1, Weeks number 2, and then I have my free Telegram community as number 3. And that sums up today's video. Despite some positive news, Bitcoin had a little bit of a correction and the altcoin market is still struggling. Meanwhile though, Ethereum is starting to show a little bit more relative strength against Bitcoin. I don't want to jinx anything, but so far it's looking good. If we can hold above that bull market support band, it will be very positive for ETH and also for altcoins. In the meantime though, GameStop bought about $500 million worth of Bitcoin and their stocks are going down. Very interesting to see, potentially suggesting that we could be at a local top. If you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.